a hot topic in the U.S. and worldwide. When we break it down into categories, one of the categories is emission standards. These emissions are the methane, carbon dioxide, all of the other pollutants that go up into the ozone and affect climate change. Personal health issues, lung disease, asthma, breathing trouble in children are all side effects. People exposed to toxic air pollutants at sufficient concentrations and durations may have an increased chance of getting cancer or experiencing other serious health effects. Immune systems, reproductive, neurological, developmental, and respiratory are all affected, according to the EPA. The United States federal government, the United Nations, and other worldwide enforcers should pass more restrictions on emission standards and big polluters. In this speech, I will be discussing how emission standards work now, the politics behind them, and what should be changed. Emission standards aren't up to date. The most recent amendment to the Clean Air Act was in 1990, according to DieselNet. The Clean Air Act requires the EPA to regulate emissions of toxic air pollutants from a published list of industrial sources. The Environmental Protection Agency is required to develop regulations for all industries that emit one or more of the pollutants in significant quantities. It was most recently amended in 1990. Emission standards aren't up to date. The EPA isn't allowed to enforce the stricter restrictions. Physical health would improve if they were, and climate change would slow down. The standards are outdated. The regulations on power plants alone are very outdated. From my own personal experience working at the Board of Public Utilities, I've learned more about the Quindaro and the Nearman power plants. The Quindaro power plant actually has been shut down for a while because they haven't been meeting the minimum restrictions for a coal-burning plant. Coal-burning plants produce way more emissions than the natural gas plants do. So Quindaro recently opened up in the past few weeks and they're burning natural gas instead. And they're meeting the minimum requirements for that. And the Nearman power plant also has to add $250 million to meet more restrictions. These are the old, outdated restrictions, though, that they're just meeting. The taxpayers have to pay for all that. The money does have to come from somewhere, but these standards are worth it in the long run. Regulations on manufacturers also need to be enforced. What they're manufacturing produces pollutants as well as how they're manufacturing. Cars, airplanes, trains are all big polluters once they're out on the market. Air conditioners, waste in general, they all pollute. And making these pollutes. The big money is able to pay the politicians. There needs to be a separation between the perpetrators and the enforcers. Polluters are allowed to contribute to the politicians through super PACs and other various ways. They don't always have to put their names in, too. They can do it anonymously, which hurts the consumers. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency can't get past the big money. The tax breaks are going to oil companies instead of going to cleaner energy. Natural gas does offer some climate benefits over coal as a source of electricity. It burns cleaner and releases less CO2, according to the Huffington Post. There are even more clean energy, though. Wind power, solar power, those don't have as many strict requirements, and they don't need to because they're not polluting nearly as much. Allowing the educated to enforce the laws would be beneficial to the public, rather than those invested in pollution. Once you become invested in pollution, that's how you make your money, and you lose track of everything going on. The public health would also improve, and climate change would slow down. The public health is deteriorating for many, many reasons, but this is a reason not many people put much thought into. Climate change also affected the Beijing Olympics a few years back. It was a big topic on even the U.S. news. Beijing's pollution levels dropped by more than half over a 24-hour period to 44 on the smog index, the lowest reading since a month before the plan took effect, according to the Associated Press. A reading below 50 is considered good. Beijing had so much smog in the city that they couldn't host an athletic event. It was embarrassing for them, and it was unsafe for the athletes. It became such an international stir. People could have used that as a way to enforce more laws. That was a stepping stone, and it still can be. It just needs to be used in the correct way. Emissions affect everyone, even the perpetrators. Regulations need to be put in place by the United States government, the United Nations, and other international enforcers. They need to be enforced now, before the damage gets too out of hand. Calling, tweeting, or emailing any public elected official to let them know this is an important issue is a great place to start. Jerry Moran and Pat Roberts are currently the Kansas senators. Jerry Moran can be tweeted at Jerry Moran, and Pat Roberts can be tweeted at @SendPatRoberts. Letting them know that these are important issues to you can make a big difference.
That was a lot better. The first one.